I'm depressed today because Hope Hicks left the White House. That's a real blow. I mean, getting into national politics, that those of us that are very close to the administration, she did a remarkable job for a very long time. The number of people that were around Mr. Trump when he first launched his campaign that are his trusted confidants, they're dwindling in that White House, and her loss is not a good thing.
Yeah, no, a subpoena from the special counsel will do that to you, I think.
Yeah.
Well, look, she had 9 hours of testimony, and
a boyfriend that beats up his ex-wives.
Yeah,
that was the thing. I mean, I think the Rob Porter involvement, the guy's beating up his ex-wife, and she's dating him, and I don't know what's going on there, but plus she's been there. She's been with the Trump administration, the campaign. She started in March of 15. Bill, that's 3 years. And look, I can say at the beginning, I mean, these people worked and still do. I mean, they work 7 days a week, 18, 20 hours a day. And, for a young woman, for any person, it's very grueling. Yeah. And
thanks, Donnie Downer, for bringing this show to a screeching halt.
Yeah, but she's got to be replaced.
Oh, listen, she's probably got a book. She's got.
Oh, she's got to make a lot of money.
She's probably can get hired by anybody, anything. At any time. She'll have a bright future, and
she'll make millions of dollars and get a bright future. But it's, the thing about the president is he needs people that understand him and are there that can talk to him. You got to be able to talk to people, right?
Sure.
And right now he's surrounded by consultants, RNC operatives, generals. It's like they turned the White House into Fort Knox in there.
Well, you say drain the swamp, but the swamp drains you.
It really does. It really does.
It's it always wins out the deep.
It's not easy to be at the other end of 20 Diet Cokes a day.
It's very tough, too. The amazing thing about being in D.C. all the time, like I am now, is that you go out and you look at these areas, everybody's a millionaire, and nobody produces anything. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I don't know. I got in the wrong field because, we get $18,000 a year here.
And that's the Northern Virginia economy that powers our state budget. What are you talking about?
That's right.
Must be that, the district budget.
Not according to that socialist delegate, Mr. Brown.
Now, what about Mark Keim, who held up Mark Keim, who held up the House?
Now that's a very good story because it's about me.
Go ahead.
So I'm presenting a bill that would help Southside, Southwest Virginia distressed areas economically, creating really enterprise-free zones. And I'm presenting this, and I'm saying, and I'm talking about exactly what I've always talked to you about, how we were at the top of the food chain and now we're at the bottom, and this is why we need it, and we need to bring industry in compared to Northern Virginia, where I grew up, and Scotty and I practiced law there early in our lives, ran up and down the hallways, and so we saw the change from 1978 when the number one industry there was dairy cows and now where it is now. Well, then this self-avowed socialist from Prince William County, Delegate Brown, was sitting there. And what
Carter
Brown. Lee Carter. Sorry. Lee Carter. See?
Lee Carter.
Well, it's socialist. You share names. So Lee Carter's sitting there, and I keep seeing this film company. Well, he had a documentary filmmaker there. So he was there, ready to grandstand. And so when he got his chance to speak, he then goes on a tirade saying Northern Virginia is not rich. They're not wealthy. They're poor. It is merely a facade that's created by the corporate fat cats and oligarchs who run that place. And people have to drive now longer miles because they're poor into Washington, D.C., and so they're moving out farther west, and it's poor. And so Mark and I have known each other for years. He represents where I grew up in Vienna, and we're kind of looking at each other like, what the heck? And so Mark and I always, as you know, John, we try to make each other laugh. We always, you know me, I try to have fun at what I do. And for a brief moment, he just turned his iPad to me, and he made me laugh while this guy was going on. It was hilarious.
The hammer and the sickle was so
hilarious.
Funny.
And it was just a brief second.
It was hilarious.
But the camera was on, he was behind him so you could see it. He just turned. It was for me only. I take the blame because he was trying to make me feel better. It was hilarious. And they turned it into some big bad thing.
No, I don't think Mark knew he was on camera when it happened. We have the cameras in the committee rooms is a new thing. The official cameras. We've always had people with cell phones and things, but Mark's done that to me before, actually.
Yeah.
He not that.
No.
He used to sit in front of me on the floor of the house, and I used to go on these tirades against homeowners. Well, I still do against homeowners associations.
Rightly so.
Yeah, right. Bill and I have worked together on that issue, but talking about property rights, and Mark would get out a Tea Party flag and sort of scoot it up into the camera while I was talking, and
That's the way Mark is. I mean, lighten up.
I mean, you gotta have
So this Lee Carter this socialist needs to lighten up. He had no humor, did not accept Mark's apology right away. And on top of it, I mean, it's humor. I mean, for socialists, you would think that laughter is not only free, it can be shared equally. So it seems to fall right into the socialist model. That's right. Well, it's free.
What Mark did
was
it was a little bit of a different spin on what he used to do.
Why don't socialists like to laugh?
Give me a break.
They don't.
They don't.
But
you ever see those films with the Socialist Workers' Party? Nobody's laughing.
There's a lot of people.
First of all, they're in the same.
Are you defending the socialists?
I'm saying there's a lot of people in the Democratic Party that are really upset about it, and Mark has been trying to make amends. And
what is there to make amends for? It was a joke.
Lee Carter's in a seat that's definitely going to get challenged. He's definitely going to be one of the top targets. It's not helpful.
He's a communist.
He's a socialist, for God's sakes.
He has a little brown suit. Walk around in a little
Mark is a liberal Democrat, but he's for economic development and all those things, and we get along great. This guy seems to walk around here with a chip on his shoulder instead of making relationships and going through processes
and
laughing and having So when Mark was actually yesterday, when Mark came to the Rules Committee, and he's presenting a joint resolution, a very important joint resolution that he had proposed, we were sitting up in the dais, so I put on my iPad a big giant smiley face, and I turned it around and showed it to him when he was presenting his bill, and he started to laugh, and he was like, "Oh no, golly!" And it's a shame that you're taking a great guy like that, and from within your own party, Surville, you're beating him up for nothing more than an attempt at humor and actually a relationship between he and I. So I take the blame. You want to blame somebody for it because I make him laugh and he makes me laugh? Blame me. Don't blame Mark Keene.
Why not blame Krause?
Blame Krause. That's easy. I blame Krause for everything else.
Krause's fault.
Blame Marsden.
Yeah.
Blame Marsden.
Yeah,
it's Marsden's fault.
I came back because
blame Marsden.
I'm hearing from the audience that you needed a really strong close.
Well, actually, Sean Connaughton is on the phone, the president and CEO.
I got to go.
No, wait, he wants you to stay. He says, make sure Bill Stanley stays. Sean Connaughton is joining us now. And he called in after listening to us. And Bill, I think we could just put it on there. You should be able to hear Sean if I turn this up big. Sean, so Sean, good to have you with us, CEO and
my mom's calling. I gotta go.
President of the
somebody's on the line with facts.
Virginia Health and Hospital Association. So, Sean, Senator Stanley says the compromise is they're going to take the money for the hospital bed tax, which is supposed to put in
That's just a prediction. It was just a prediction.
And no lockbox for you, Sean. They're taking your money. And no Medicare expansion. No lockbox for you.
Bill reopen that wonderful hospital out there and get one of my members back up on their feet. Bill, work with us. Bill, please work with us.
Sean, I love you to death, and you do a great job. And certainly, I wouldn't want you to be in this predicament in the first place. It's just where we are. And again, I was saying, if there's going to be, the House is going to have to make a decision whether they love the spending or whether they love, Medicaid expansion, because they get both. And usually, in a compromise, you don't get both. I mean, there's no way that I see the Senate just caving like that, and not the Senate Republicans. So that's the choice here.
Then why can't they do that compromise?
Well, but again,
take some of the spending out, but leave the expansion in.
But we're against the bed tax. We don't think the hospitals should foot the bill there either. A tax is a tax. Someone asked in an earlier part of your segment of whether that tax would show up on a hospital bill. Well, only if the tax is passed along to the consumer, I would think that would be showing up to the bill. But I would think a tax like this on the hospitals is going to be eaten by the hospitals. So that cuts into their bottom line again. So I don't know. We're helping and hurting at the same time.
But the purpose of the tax on the hospitals, the VHHA breasts originally agreed to looking at it, is that was to fund the 10% gap. Remember, McAuliffe, our big argument was back when McAuliffe was for this, it's going to go to 90% and that's going to bankrupt the state. And then the VHHA said, okay, well, our hospitals can find a way to fund that gap, to bridge that gap. But now you want to you want to take the money, and it's not even going into the lockbox.
No, I'm not saying that, but look at the House budget does that. I mean, the House budget does it. It doesn't fund the gap.
I know, but
in fact, they have a surplus of $100 and some odd million from the initial expansion. They're spending that, and then they're taking the tax and spending that. And so,
yeah, but they want the money from Medicaid.
So they're not.
They want the federal government.
So they're not taking the money that they're either deriving from the hospital or Medicaid expansion block grant money and spending it on health care. They're spending it on something else.
Sean, what's your response to this? David's shaking his head.
Sean does not like the tax, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, we've traditionally not been supportive of doing these types of taxes. particularly because we're for the traditional Medicaid program, it's a 50-50 split. And so, we give in $1, we get back $2. But when you do that, a lot of the hospitals actually will put in dramatically more money in taxes, and they'll get back in reimbursement. So we've always been against that, against the provider assessment. What is different here is obviously we would put in $1, we get $10 back, and a lot of that would go towards, essentially dealing with a lot of the uncompensated care, which is about 7.5% of the patients that we currently see. Our big challenge is, making sure that if we do this, because the way it's written right now, the tax is only limited to 70 hospitals in the state. They will absorb 100% of the tax because and we only get back, and I think everyone needs to understand is that, the hospitals we estimate will only get about 36% of the money that's generated back. The rest of it goes to pharmaceuticals, home health care, individual doctors. So we're only getting 36% back. Still, it's for us. I mean, we put $1 in, you get 3.6 back. But the other issue that we keep on trying to raise is you have to deal with this issue on the current Medicaid rates, because we get 36% back of essentially reimbursements at 71 cents on the dollar. And
but isn't that a separate issue, Sean? Because
that for a lot of hospitals,
Medicaid rates
the way
are not
it's currently structured.
But Sean, Medicaid rates are not even part of this. They're not even part of this dialogue, Sean. I mean, that's a separate dialogue.
We in the Senate believe that he should be. He's right. We should up the rates of reimbursement. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but it's not even. It's not even in the House bill. It's not even part of the debate. This debate is about expanding Medicaid and taking the money from the federal government. And there's no debate on Medicaid rates.
But
right?
I do want to.
That's not part of the discussion.
John, I believe we addressed it in our budgets.
It is also about making sure that when we get expansion, that we have more providers out there, and that it doesn't become a quote-unquote drag on the provider network. But listen, we're willing to have this dialogue. The points that Senator Stanley make are very, very valid points. They're things that we have been raising, and that's why we really want to work with both the House and the Senate to come to some sort of compromise to get us, that allow us to draw down this federal money that protects the state's finances and also provides health care to people. And I just got to tell you, Bill Stanley has been a great friend. We've worked on so many different issues, and we're prepared to work with him and his colleagues in the Senate, as well as the members in the House of Delegates, to get to somewhere that I think we can address everyone's concerns.
Bring coloring books, Dave Marsden just said. So, yeah, and I think he's exactly right too. I mean, a tax is a tax, and we're dealing with the loss of revenues based on Obamacare that the hospitals had through the extraction of Medicare, and the promise of expansion and what that would make up the difference, even make it bigger, what the losses were nationwide. And it's a tricky situation, and it's something we all have to work with. I mean, look, I'm against reforming COPN. I think it's, people say, you can allow some of the imaging equipment and stuff to go to, private physicians and the like, and take them out of hospitals. Well, in some of our hospitals that otherwise, take a lot more uncompensated care and for otherwise might not be in the black, that's the difference maker for them. And so the problem is when you have COPN reform where you eliminate it, so somebody takes that imaging equipment and guess what? They don't take the bad with it. They take only the good, the cherry, the cherry on top, and the good stuff, and so that's bad. And the other thing is look, I don't want to go in and get a spray tan the same place where I get a CT scan. I'd rather trust my hospitals.
Well,
given by the same 19-year-old that sprays me.
Au contraire, in terms of what we've been told by the private providers is that they will reserve a certain percentage of their work for those who are disadvantaged.
Horse hockey.
I always wondered how Bill Stanley maintained that natural glow.
But we're providing the hospitals with people who have insurance that they don't have to provide free health care to. That's the difference.
Oh, goodness. You're drinking the Kool-Aid.
And
so
again,
you're hurting
one of the
hospitals.
challenges is just this year, we saw this dramatic increase in our Medicare shortfall, and that's because these cutbacks that were in the Affordable Care Act have now started to kick in, and we're close to $1 billion now in shortfall in reimbursement for services that we end
Single
up
payers
providing,
coming,
which makes these issues like COPN even more important. And then also, as Senator Stanley, or is it, I'm not sure whether it was Bill said this, but this challenge that, you know, the way the original Affordable Care Act was structured was that these cutbacks in Medicare were going to be made up by less uncompensated care by people who got coverage under the Medicaid expansion program. And that didn't happen. So we're getting the cuts to Medicare, but then we're not getting right now the greater numbers of insured from those who are currently uninsured that could be covered under Medicaid expansion.
See, Sean has just described why the Democrats did this. It's their fault. Obamacare was under the Democratic administration. They took away $750 billion nationwide from hospitals and said, we'll give you this. And they tried to make Medicaid compulsory. And the Supreme Court said, well, Medicaid is an optional, voluntary program to the states, so you can't make it compulsory on the states. And that was the difference. But when they made that ruling, Obamacare didn't come back in and restore that Medicare funding. They still have it out.
They assumed, Bill, that we wouldn't be so foolish as to turn it down.
Yeah, right. I mean, the whole premise that was the Medicaid expansion was going to plug the final hole, and when you didn't plug that hole, you still got all these uninsured people running around, running up the bill and not paying for it, and that puts all the pressure on the private pay side to make it up.
Scotty, if Medicare was left where it was, and remember, Medicare is paid in, paid out. Right. Medicare was left where it was, we wouldn't be having these problems. We probably wouldn't be having these discussions right now. It's that $1 billion gap that he's talking about. That puts a hospital in a situation where they have to look at the state and say, can you please try to expand Medicaid so we can make up the differences?
I don't know.
But obviously,
that's going to be the final word because we are out of time.
Not cool.
All very valid.
Sean, you've got the final words. You got 30 seconds. Go ahead.
We saw Washington couldn't do this, and so now we're left with what the law is, and that's why we need to work within the current parameters.
All right.
God bless you, Sean. You're the best guy ever. I love that guy. I do.
I know, Sean. Whatever you've done, you've energized Bill Stanley today. He's saying that Sean has agreed with me on everything, and I'm really the smartest guy in the room.
Sean's a former resident of the 36th Senate District. Thank you.
Yes.
I mean, Bill's all excited now, right?
I love you.
See, we ran to Steph off.
I love you, Sean.
It's like we ran to Steph off, and then Stanley came in to bail out the entire Republican caucus. Didn't he?
Yeah.
Bill Stanley to the rescue.
That's right.
Steph couldn't do it. Stanley came in, bailed their tails out. Look, Medicaid expansion is going to pass. 2 people are going to cave.